So I'm going to be talking about two programs, okay? And I view these as sort of intermediate programs between what OpenSCAD presents and then what Fusion 360 presents, okay? And so some people will say, hey, I want to try out some of these things, and others will say, maybe not, okay? So the first thing I'm going to do is Solve Space. And the Solve Space is a parametric CAD system, and it allows you to, let's see if I can, that's working. Let's see if it'll let me. Okay, so you tend to do things in a 2D plane, and then you have constraints that you can apply to things. So basically, this line down here is perpendicular to that line. This line is parallel to that line. This line is parallel to that line. And there's just a whole bunch of constraints. And it just sort of, as I'm moving this thing around, it is recomputing the locations of everything so that it fits the constraints. And then I'm showing this in 2D space, but in fact it is a 3D model. It's just it's harder to move things around in 3D. Okay, so this is tutorial 1 on the Solve Space page. And from these you can generate STL files that you can 3D print. I haven't found a good solution for getting DXF files that you can use for laser printing yet. I'm pretty sure there's a way to do it, but I just haven't found it yet. The tutorials are actually very legible and easy to understand. The learning curve on this is probably, I'd say, an hour or two, and you'll probably be pretty facile with it, okay? The other thing I like about this is, let me go show the next thing. It supports assemblies, okay? Okay, so this is an assembly, and my mouse isn't working, so I'm having to do this with my touchpad. I'm not very good at touchpads. There we go. So this is a sort of a pencil holder that's made out of a bunch of parts. Now the interesting thing about Solve Space is they have a constraint system that also works for assemblies. So I'm not going to show it, but you can drag things around, and it can resize everything to fit. And so you can basically make for sure all your pieces fit together, which is very useful. So that's as far as I really have gone with actually building things in Solve Space. But they have some features that are quite a bit more impressive than that. And I'm going to show that next. And let's see. Okay. So this is a mechanical assembly, and it's all the pieces are assembled with a constraint system. And this is a walker. And as you can see, I'm just dragging this thing around, and it is computing all of the linkages and everything as I move it around, okay? It's easier to move things around in 2D space, but it really is a 3D subsystem. So that's really all I wanted to show about Solve Space. Okay, so think of it as it's a more graphical way of doing 3D design. For us people who are like programmers who've been coding in Fortran and stuff like that for most of our lives, we might find that OpenSCAD is a little easier for us to do. But if you're not really a programmer, you might just find that Solve Space is easier for you to use. Okay, it runs on Windows, Mac, and Linux, and it's free, and it doesn't have this feeling of like you're going to spend like days learning it. It's more like an hour or two, and you're pretty good to go. Okay, so that's really all I wanted to do about Solve Space. Now I'm going to go on to the bigger program, which is FreeCAD. Now FreeCAD is meant to be, in the long term, something that's similar in functionality to SolidWorks, Onshape, Fusion 360, Autodesk Inventor. It's meant to be one of those, it does it all kinds of things. It is not there yet at the moment. So here's a fairly standard part that you can do in FreeCAD. So if you want to make an individual part, you can see the little pieces. So that they drew that. You can go, and everything's hierarchical. I'm not going to go into a lot of demonstration here because it just takes too long. And then you go. Let's see if I can get it to show the part again. Yeah, little sheet. And I am not an expert on FreeCAD. I've been looking at it for 2 or 3 years. I keep every 6 months I go check it out again. And for me, the biggest problem with FreeCAD is they haven't gotten assemblies to work right yet. Okay, and if you're trying to build a robot, there's lots of pieces that go together, and it's just really difficult to do multiple parts inside FreeCAD 0.17, which is what the current version is. They are working on it really, really hard, and there's a new assembly module that's under active development, and guess what? It uses the Solve Space constraint solver to do it. So it'll be able to do things similar to what Solve Space does in terms of constraints, but for assemblies. Okay. Now there's a lot more that you can do in FreeCAD. Okay, so I'll just grab a couple more. So they have a robot module. I've never figured it out, but the concept here is you'll be able to simulate your robot doing things. So they have an architectural module. So when you decide you're going to go build your own house or something, you can do that. These things are called workbenches. That how you do all of this. There's something for the really high-end people, and this example doesn't show anything, but they have something called Finite element model, and so you can basically put your project under forces and see how they deform under forces. So, and then the other thing I want to show, this is the full list of work benches that they use. And for me, the thing that I'm very interested in is the path module. Okay. Not cooperating here. Let's go bring the path module up. Okay, with the path module, it's a CAM system, so it allows CAM, computer-aided manufacture, so it can generate CNC files to drive a CNC mill, a lathe, drill presses, all of that stuff, right off your model. If you make a change to your model, it will change the paths to fit the model. And that's what your higher-end systems can do. This thing is going to be totally free, no costs, no restrictions. But as I say, right now, today, for robots, I wouldn't use it because I don't feel it has good enough assembly support. Okay. And then we're going to let Mark talk about Fusion 360, which I think is better. So I'll take just a couple quick questions here, and then we'll go to Mark's presentation. Chris.
Yeah, I'm really fascinated by the materials simulator. Now,
Yeah.
Is that like a full-on?
Full FEM.
Now, does it have a physics engine, or is it just a materials engine? I'm not.
I can't answer that question. I'd be making it up. Sorry. Okay, I'm going to do.
Does it do G-code generation?
It does do G-code generation. That's what that CAM package is. Okay, and so if you only want to make a single part, go for it, because it actually has a very good G-code generator. So it does pocketing and all sorts of stuff, and it has very good path computation. I've been very impressed with it. So we're going to do one more question in back. I don't know your name.
Francisco. So when it comes to stress test, can you do PLA and ABS?
I don't know the answer to that. I'm sorry. I just don't like making up answers. So you would have to go look at the documentation. So again, FreeCAD runs on Mac, Windows, and Linux, and I think I'm going to give them about another year, and I think they're going to have assemblies, and then I'm probably going to take and do the learning curve. This one feels like it's a multi-day learning curve to get up to speed on it. Okay. Now, you only do that if you think you're going to get the value out of it. At this point in time, I've tried to do complex assemblies in it, and it just wasn't working for me.